What's up, guys? That Northwestern result last night, very frustrating. They were winning for most of that game. It seemed like they were going to pull away multiple times, or at least pull away from that number. I had 3.5, and the number went off at 5.5 or 5 or something like that. So I obviously got pretty much the best of it. And it seemed like every time they were about to push that lead, something happened that didn't allow that to be the case, and Maryland shot some real outlier field goal percentage, like 53% or something from the field, not typical. I think Northwestern was probably the right side in that one still, and they missed by a half point on the number that I got. Very frustrating. Moving to today, just going to talk about a few games here. It's a lot of the lower conferences in college basketball here. I think I got one play that I've picked off here, and that's going to be on Northern Arizona, plus 4.5. They're at home hosting. Who are they even hosting? I don't fucking know. Portland State, yeah, in this Big Sky matchup here. I look at this one. Portland State's. They're coming off a pretty big win. They just beat Weber State. I know I mentioned Sacramento State had come off a nice win over Weber State, and they were still able to win and cover, I think, in their next game against Idaho State is in a game with a very small line, barely getting there. But I do like this one to fade Portland State here. They're 11-6 overall, 2-2 in conference now. Portland State, they beat Weber, who may still be the best team in the Big Sky, and they're now tied with Weber State, so that's a big win. And then coming up after this, they have Northern Colorado, who's 2-1 in conference, so they're actually above Portland State in the conference. And then they have Montana and Montana State after that, so Montana 2-2, 11-6, tied with them, and usually one of the better teams in this conference, and Montana State has been one of the better teams in the conference for the last few years, and they're at 3-1 in the conference. And who do they have in between all that? Coming off the big win over Weber State, and with Northern Colorado, Montana State all coming up next, some of the better teams in the conference. Oh, they have the team that's at the bottom of the conference, Northern Arizona here, and they have to go to their house. Northern Arizona 0-3 in conference, 7-10 overall. I think they might overlook Northern Arizona here. Portland State's in a letdown spot. Beating Weber State is a pretty big win. It's a nice win. That was at home, and I think Weber State was still like a 5.5-point road favorite in that one. So Portland State is not as good as their record indicates. Northern Arizona, maybe not quite as bad as their record indicates, even though we know Portland State is the better team of these two. But I like Northern Arizona here. Northern Arizona is coming off an embarrassing performance against Montana, where they lost 90-47 on the road. They lost at Montana State before that. Now they get to come back home. When you lose 90-47, I mean, come on, man. That's going to serve to refocus you. That's an embarrassing loss. That's one of the worst losses that Northern Arizona's had this year. Northern Arizona, they haven't faced the easiest schedule either, which is affecting their record a little bit. They lost to UConn Grand Canyon really early in the season, IPFW. They beat Seattle, which isn't that bad a game there, and they beat Abilene Christian, who's not really that bad a team either. So their schedule, and they lost to San Francisco, who's also pretty good. So their schedule, I think, is actually tougher than Portland State's. As Portland State has had a couple of decent opponents, but not as crazy as what Northern Arizona has faced. So I like this one. I think Northern Arizona is going to be in an angry mood coming off that embarrassing loss. And due to kind of a scheduling quirk this late in the season, this is actually their home conference opener. They're 0-3 in conference, with all three of those games having been on the road so far. So this is their first home conference game. So I like it for Northern Arizona. They also did lose both games to Portland State last year, and I believe they lost both times by 1 point. Northern Arizona was good last, they were 9th in the conference, I think, last year, but they made that nice run in the conference tournament last year, if I remember correctly. I don't know how many guys they're returning from that team, but they could be a little bit sneaky here. So they did at least cover this number of 4.5 both times they played Portland State last year. I don't know what the spread actually was in both of those games. Portland State also has not really been a team winning by margin on the road here. Their first 2 road games of the season they did against Air Force and Santa Barbara, but since then they've won their road games by 3, 5. They lost by 4. They won another one by 3 at Fresno, and then they got blown out at Eastern Washington, blown out at Kansas City. So their road performance has not been very good either. So I think they're in a letdown spot in Northern Arizona. Northern Arizona is also in a bounce back spot. So I'm on Northern Arizona plus 4.5. Over in the NBA, one game that I almost wanted to play here is on the Chicago Bulls, but I just can't do it based on the number. The number, I think, has been over-adjusted because of the spot that Toronto is in being pretty bad. Toronto's playing a third game in 4 days, but they've been at home for all 3 of those. But 2 games ago, they lost to the Celtics by 9. That's a pretty decent performance, losing to the Celtics only by 9. Then they crushed Miami last night. They absolutely blew the doors off Miami, and Butler played. And I think I said Butler was hurt in the previous game, but he actually wound up playing in that game too. So I don't know what's up with that. That's a little weird. But Toronto was able to they absolutely destroyed Miami last night, which makes them look really good. Toronto had just traded away, I believe, their big man. I forget what the deal was, but they traded away one of their starters, so he didn't play in that game. Siakam, however you pronounce his name, he's gone. So they traded him away. He did not play in their game last night, but they blew out Miami, and they're on a back-to-back. And they have the Knicks up next, which is a bit of a bigger opponent than Chicago. So I think they're kind of in a letdown spot for such a crazy win over Miami. Chicago has had a couple days off, and they're below 500, of course. They've had 2 days off, and now they're going to Toronto after another bad loss. Or I thought they were going to put up a better performance than they did, at least against Cleveland. I think it was a little better than the final score looks, at least. So the spot's bad for Toronto, and it's much better for Chicago to bounce back. However, I can't quite do it because Chicago is they've flipped from a 1.5 dog to a 2.5 favorite on the road. They do have 72% of the cash, with 52% of the tickets being on the Raptors. So it does look like the market indicators are still on the Chicago Bulls, but I can't lay 2.5 on the road, man. Power ratings that we look at have these teams pretty close to even, some with the Raptors being slightly better than the Bulls even. So this line should not be the Bulls minus 2.5, really. Depends on the situation. I mean, like I said, Toronto did trade away their big man, and this is going to be their second game without him now, and they had a blowout win in their previous game. But this number's factoring in the back-to-back. It might be over-adjusted a little bit to the trade that Toronto just made and to the fact that they're on a back-to-back. So I don't like what I think is an over-adjustment here. I don't think there's that much value. I like the side and the spot for the Bulls. Certainly, yes. I would not play the Raptors here, but I think that the number is not really giving us value on the side of the Bulls, really having to lay points on the road. The game that I'm actually on in the NBA is on the Indiana Pacers plus 7.5. I don't think this is a good spot at all for Sacramento. They're returning home from a long road trip. Pretty long road trip, a 5-game road trip, and they finished it off with an overtime loss at Milwaukee, which is like about as good as you can look in a loss, really. 143 to 142 in overtime. I was on Sacramento in that one. It was a good spot for them to bounce back off of a really ugly loss to Charlotte. The only games they won on this road trip were against Detroit and Charlotte, so not impressive there, but good performance against Milwaukee, where they lost by 1, and then they lost only by 2 to Phoenix in the next game, where Sacramento had a huge lead in that game against Phoenix. I think they were winning by 26, like with not that much time left. With like 8 minutes left in the game, maybe less, 6 minutes left, whatever it was. And Phoenix made an absolutely insane comeback and actually wound up winning the game and still not covering. But that was absolutely ridiculous. Sacramento totally dominated that game. I don't know how they completely unraveled like this. So I don't like that at all for Sacramento, playing 2 big effort games like that, and the way they totally unraveled when they had the game against Phoenix and should have won it. Now they come back home. They face an Indiana team that does have a decent record, with only 1 day off. I don't like it. This has been a pretty long road trip. It took them all the way out to the East Coast, basically. And Indiana's coming off a really ugly-looking loss against the Utah Jazz and staying on the road. They've had 2 days off now, but that was off a better performance. So they only lost by 8 at Denver. So they were not in a good spot. They were on a back-to-back after that, going into Utah in a third game in 4 days, all in different cities, playing back-to-back Denver and Utah, the two elevation games like that. That's not a good spot. And they lost 132 to 105, which is a terrible-looking loss to Utah. So I think they're going to want to bounce back. They play Portland tomorrow. I don't think they're going to be looking ahead to that game. I think they're going to be focused on Sacramento here, getting a pretty big number here, a lot of points here. I'm fading Sacramento in the return home spot with Indiana in a bounce back spot. Indiana Pacers plus 7.5. And then over in the NHL, some of these lines are kind of unfortunate, but one of the games that I'm not quite going to do, but I like the side, is to fade the Vancouver Canucks. They are returning home from a long road trip. They're down from minus 215 to minus 198 on the money line as a favorite. 97% of the cash, it looks like, on Vancouver. I don't know how accurate that is. These percentages I don't think have really come to fruition yet on pregame's website here, and it looks like the tickets are evenly split 50-50. I don't know about that, but Vancouver's returning home from a road trip, so they're not in a good spot here. A long road trip. 7-game road trip, but they did lose the last game of the road trip. The road trip, they won the middle 5 of them, and it was bookended by 2 losses to teams that aren't really that good, St. Louis, and then a shootout loss to Columbus, which is pretty ugly looking. And now they've had 2 days off since then. So at least they have the extra day off to get right, but they do have Toronto up next, and Toronto's got a pretty good record. So I don't know if they're going to be fully focused on Arizona or not, although Arizona has a decent record. I just can't really do it because I do like the Arizona side, but the number's kind of in no man's land here where I can't play the puck line because it would be taking Arizona plus 1.5 goals at like minus 140. Don't really want to lay that price to take the 1.5 goals. You can get them as an underdog like plus 170 something, which I don't quite want to do that either. So unfortunately, I'm just going to lay off of this one, but I wouldn't mind if you wanted to throw some on the Arizona money line here. I think it's fine if you want to do that. Arizona actually has less rest. I think they have 1 day off rather than 2. They played into overtime though against Calgary. Really kind of a tough game though, because it was on the road. It was as a road underdog. So, but I think they will still be focused on a Vancouver team that has a really good record, though. But that was kind of a bullshit loss for Arizona. I was on Arizona in that one. I didn't like the spot for Calgary. They were returning home from the dad trip and from beating Arizona to start the dad trip on the road there and beating Vegas after that. And Arizona blew a 2-0 lead in the final 8 minutes or something. So I don't know. Maybe it'll be a little bit tough for them to bounce back from that one. But I really don't like the price more than anything in this one. So I'll just stay away. One game where I don't like the price, but I'm still just going to do it because I can't help myself, is Ottawa Senators. They're up from minus 175 to minus 177. It looks like I laid somewhere around there. What did I lay? Minus 175, actually. Yeah, so Ottawa Senators, looks like it might be going up a little bit. This is just such a bad spot for Montreal that I can't even help myself, even though the price looks too heavy on Ottawa. So I don't really love that. And it looks like, what are you doing, like laying a price with Ottawa like this when Ottawa has the worst record than Montreal by a lot? Yeah, they do. I'm not even convinced Ottawa's the better team. The line is saying they're the better team here, so maybe it's taking into account the situation, but I'm just going to lay the money line, even if it's a heavy money line. Montreal is really not that good either. Kind of a middling team, but this is a horrible spot for Montreal. It's a third game in 4 days, all in different cities, a back-to-back. And the last 2 games, they just beat Colorado at home, and they went into New Jersey, beat New Jersey. Now they have no days off. They go to Ottawa, who hasn't really been playing well at all, and they have Boston up on Saturday in 2 days. So this is a sandwich spot. It's a terrible, terrible spot, almost no rest. So I'm willing to lay the extra price here just to get Ottawa to just win the game here. I'll just do it. And Ottawa just played a similar common opponent in Colorado, and got the doors blown off of them 7-4. They at least have 1 day off, and they're not traveling. So I think they'll probably be focused on this one because they need to do something. They've lost so many recent games here, losing whatever it is, 6 of their last 7 and 7 of their last 9. They also got blown out by New Jersey, another common opponent who Montreal just beat. So there are just too many factors here. It's too much of a bad spot for the Montreal Canadiens here. The line looks a bit suspicious, laying a price like this with an Ottawa team that looks like they're the much worse team. I think it's at least close. I don't think Montreal is very good, so I think this is they're at least somewhat close in how good they are here, but the spot is awful. I actually laid the minus 175 with Ottawa because I can't quite help myself. All of those things that I just mentioned, it's a horrible spot for Montreal. And it might be an even worse spot for the LA Kings. So this is the other game I'm on. LA Kings are down from minus 150 to minus 147. It looks like they have 67% of the tickets, 99% of the cash, which I don't buy that percentage. I buy they're going to be public, and they're moving down a little bit on the money line. So I might jump in on this when you can, getting a better price here. I got Nashville plus 138, something in that range. I think that's what it was, something like that. LA Kings are coming home from a long road trip, a 6-game road trip. It took them all the way around the East Coast and then into Dallas, and they lost all but one of those games. They have one day off, so people are going to think, well, they're going to bounce back, right? They just had a really bad road trip. They had a really good record going into the road trip, even though they lost a few games prior to that road trip as well. Most of those were to good teams. So, like, what's wrong with LA? People are going to think, well, it was a road trip. It was a tough road trip. A couple of the games were overtime. It was a lot of close games, except close losses for all the losses, except the loss to Dallas as the final loss there, which people might excuse because Dallas is a good team. Now they're coming home. They got Nashville. Nashville does have a decent record, but only one day off and returning home from a road trip. As I always say, the return home from the road trip is always a distraction spot because these guys have families and stuff. They're coming back home. They have to do things family-wise around the home there. So they don't really have the ability sometimes to fully focus on that hockey game. They're coming back. People are going to think LA's the better team here. They're going to bounce back now they're back at home. I don't think that that's how it works. When you return home from a road trip, it's a tough spot to be in. The line looks like you're getting a cheap price on LA. It's almost too easy to take LA. I don't buy it. I'm taking Nashville, and LA does have the New York Rangers up next, although they've not been playing as well as of late. Their record is still quite good. They're still one of the best teams in the Eastern Conference. So LA might overlook Nashville just a little bit here, even though Nashville's been playing decent hockey as of late recently. They've been playing okay hockey, but they did lose their previous game to Vegas pretty badly, 4-1. So I think they might be in a bounce back spot here, and they have 2 days off. Going from Vegas to LA, it's less travel than what LA is dealing with as well. Even though it's a second straight road game for Nashville, they have 2 days off to prepare for this. They played not very well against Vegas, so I like this. They're going to be focused on an LA team that has a pretty good record, so I like it. So I'm on the Nashville Predators. So this whole card here, college basketball, Northern Arizona plus 4.5. In the NBA, Indiana Pacers plus 7.5, and in hockey, Ottawa Senators minus 175, and Nashville Predators plus 138. That's going to do it for me, man. Let's get back on the winning track here. It's a lot of games for a Thursday card that's not as big, although the hockey card's pretty big. Let's get it done, man. Have a good day. Peace.